At dawn, a black neighborhood in Tulsa, Oklahoma, homes, churches, businesses, was a smoking horizon of ash. Not after a foreign invasion, not after a natural disaster, after a mob attack that unfolded in hours and shaped the next century in silence. They called Greenwood Black Wall Street, and in 1921 it became one of the nation's most devastating racial atrocities, an event so destructive that even the number of dead is still debated. Records indicate 36, while estimates reach up to 300. Nearly 9,000 people were left without homes. It's not just a story about what happened. It's about how it happened, through fear, rumor, and power, and how a community fought to rebuild when the country looked away. Tonight, we return to Tulsa, to Greenwood, to the moment a thriving American neighborhood was set on fire, and the truth was buried for generations. To understand the tragedy, you have to see what Greenwood was, a place where African Americans, shut out of white Tulsa by segregation, built their own economy, their own institutions, their own center of gravity. In the Commission's report, Greenwood's development is tied to black leadership and entrepreneurship, figures like O.W. Gurley and J.B. Stratford, names connected to real property, real investment, and real community building.
Greenwood was a statement. We will educate our children. We will hire our own. We will worship freely. We will own land, open storefronts, and refuse to shrink. And that success mattered because in Jim Crow America, black prosperity was often treated as a provocation, a David who wasn't supposed to stand tall next to Goliath. Section title: Rumor, Sensationalism, and the Threat of Lynching. Post-World War I America was tense, economically, socially, politically. And Tulsa, the library notes, carried a reputation for racial violence and lynching, becoming a tinderbox. Then came the spark. A young black man, Dick Rowland of Rowland, and a young white woman, Sarah Page. What exactly happened in an elevator became the subject of rumor, then headline, then threat. And in an America where lynching had become a weapon of racial terror, the fear in Greenwood was not abstract. A lynch mob gathered at the courthouse. Black men, many of them veterans who had worn the nation's uniform, came to protect Rowland from being taken. And when weapons, fear, and authority collide, a single moment can tip into catastrophe. Section title: Courthouse Confrontation. Accounts converge on a volatile scene: armed white men outside the jail, armed black men arriving with a clear purpose: protection. A confrontation, a struggle, then gunfire. And with that sound, Tulsa crossed a line. The Commission report emphasizes how quickly the violence spread, how the city's systems failed, and how the damage would become historic. This is the point where the narrative often becomes simplified into chaos, but chaos is not the whole story. Because what followed wasn't just panic, it was organized destruction. Section title: The Attack on a Community. As night gave way to morning, Greenwood was attacked. The Tulsa Library account describes devastation spanning 35 to 40 square blocks, with virtually every structure in the commercial district destroyed. Imagine it. Families waking to shouting, mothers pulling children close, neighbors running through smoke past businesses they built with decades of sacrifice. And here is the personal tragedy at the heart of this story. Not a single life, but thousands, forced to choose between staying and dying, or fleeing and losing everything. This wasn't only property, it was memory, security, future. Section title: Internment and Control After the Flames. When the fires burned down, survival didn't mean freedom. The University of Oklahoma Resource Summary notes that survivors were placed in an internment camp and that National Guard troops forced survivors into temporary servitude. That is the cruel turn. A community attacked, then treated as a problem to be contained. And in this moment, Goliath isn't one person, it's a system. Law, media, economics, and violence working in the same direction. Greenwood's people were alive, but they were being managed, monitored, and blocked from returning to normal life. Section title: Insurance Denials and Legal Roadblocks. What happens after a disaster? In a fair world, the answer is simple: relief, compensation, rebuilding. But the OU summary points to a different reality. Insurance companies refused to compensate many black property owners, and the city government passed an ordinance later declared unconstitutional, intended to prevent Greenwood's reconstruction. So Greenwood faced a second catastrophe, the catastrophe of being denied a future. A neighborhood burned, then told it could not rise again. Yet people rebuilt anyway, because dignity is not something you can burn out of a community. Section title: The Cover-Up and the Missing Record. Here is the turning point that makes Tulsa not only a massacre, but a national warning. The OU summary includes a chilling detail. Unknown persons physically removed the inflammatory article from the newspaper when the Tulsa Tribune was later archived. That is not just neglect, that is erasure. Because when the record disappears, accountability disappears with it. When the story is mislabeled, minimized, or buried, injustice becomes a template, a rehearsal for the next time power wants to silence the harmed. And for decades, many Americans never learned Greenwood's name, not because it wasn't important, but because forgetting was convenient. Section title: Numbers that don't capture grief. The Tulsa Library notes over 700 injured, property damage estimated at nearly $1.5 million, and deaths ranging between 36 and 300. But numbers are only the shadow of what happened. Because every estimate is a family's missing father, a sister who never came home, a child who learned what terror sounded like. The commission report, created decades later, exists because the harm did not vanish when the smoke cleared. It lingered, emotionally, physically, economically, across generations. And still, the country struggled to say, this was wrong. This was preventable. This demands repair.
In 2001, the Oklahoma Commission's final report made clear it was not a court. It could not order restitution. But the report did outline recommendations for reparations-related policy, including direct payments to survivors and descendants, scholarships, and economic development efforts in Greenwood. That matters because it reframes the story, not only what happened, but what is owed after the harm. This is where Tulsa becomes present tense, because the aftermath of violence is not only trauma, it's lost wealth, lost opportunity, and a city redrawn by force. The Tulsa Library quotes a simple command: truth, the truth, our truth. Because the first step toward preventing repetition is refusing to forget. Greenwood's legacy is not only what was destroyed, it's what was built and rebuilt despite the forces aligned against it. If you live in the United States, this is part of your history, not as a weapon of guilt, but as a test of conscience. What do we do with truth once we know it? Do we look away, or do we repair what we can and protect what we must? If this story moved you, share it, because silence is how erasure wins. Subscribe for more documentary histories that connect the past to the choices we face today. And in the description, you'll find sources, timelines, and primary documents so you can go deeper than headlines. Greenwood was an American achievement, and the truth of what happened there is an American responsibility.